Okay, so Screencast here. Screencast 3 is on the perception of light or photoreception, how your eye gets light and what does it do with it. Now, let's start off with this diagram here. All right, as you can see, light enters through the pupil, passes through the lens, which should, if your eyes are working correctly, focus that light back and on to the retina, which you can see here is in red and continuous with the optic nerve. All right. All right, so if light is passing in through the retina, you can see a chunk of the retina taken out, represented right there. These cells, these shapes are meant to represent these sensory neurons. You'll notice there's a red, there's a green, there's a blue, and then there are several other sensory neurons. All right, so we're going to take and highlight this diagram right here, right there. Going to get out of here and go to the smartboard. This is a diagram you're going to have to label. All right, it's an easy one to label. All right, so I'm going to go actually from here this way with the diagram. So first off, let's start off with the layer of pigmented cells. All right, that pigmented cells is really black. All right, and what the function of those cells in the retina is to absorb the light, to prevent other images from reflecting or being formed other than the one that you want to form. Closest to those pigment cells are your actual sensory neurons. All right, the actual sensory neurons. We're going to start on the bottom here. You see this set of three and the shape that they have. Those are rod cells. Those are photoreceptor cells. All right, and rod cells, some of the things you should know about rod cells, they are more sensitive to light, all right, which means all visible wavelengths of light, rod cells are sensitive to. They are better in dim light, which is why rod cells are often thought of as black and white vision or night vision. And they are also much more widely distributed in the eye, on the retina than our cone cells. All right, the other cell specific is called a cone cell. All right, and there are three types of cone cells, not shown here, but you saw it on the other diagram: a red, a green, and a blue cone cell. And those are responsible for color vision and visual acuity, acute seeing of something. And that, of course, is if there is enough light. You'll notice how the cone cell, all right, has its own extension here. We're talking about the extension that the rod has too, but three rods feed into one extension here, while cones, all right, a single cone cell to a single nerve fiber. On the bottom, a group of rod cells form a single nerve fiber, more rod cells per. All right, so these are your two types of photoreceptors, your cone and your rod cells. All right. So if we go down, some of the other things that you'll need to know here, let's find your bipolar neuron. Okay, your bipolar neuron right there. All right, a bipolar neuron combines impulses from rod and cone cells. So you see a bipolar neuron here and a bipolar. And what I mean by bipolar, we'll take a look at it. Two sides to it. A bipolar neuron, not all right, different kind. And of course, as you go in and look through the bipolar, you see I still have another space there as well. All right, the cell at the end there that I have this pointing to is called a ganglion cell. All right, a ganglion cell is really just a fancy name for a sensory neuron of the optic nerve. All right, so notice it's connected to the, oops, I didn't spell that in, so I'll do it here. The optic nerve. Right, the optic nerve right here on the bottom here. So a ganglion cell is nothing more than the sensory neuron, of the optic nerve. All right, and there's your optic nerve here. So light is actually going to pass in and through, bounce off, and the direction of the impulse here goes this way, the beginning of the impulse, because back here is the very back of your eye. All right, so the very back of your eye is there. So again, highlighted, this is the nerve cells of your ganglion fibers. All right, nerve cells of the ganglion, the optic nerve. All right, so forms the continuous with the optic nerve. A bipolar neuron combines impulses from the rod and the cone cell. I'm going the other direction now. 3 rod cells to each bipolar neuron, 1 cone cell. All right, cone cell visual acuity, red, green, and blue. Here, sensitive to all wavelengths of light. And layer of pigmented cells really absorbs light to keep images from reflecting. All right, so you have the structure of the retina. Notice we go back to the PowerPoint and you go back to this diagram just for a second. Then we're going to bring up a comparison table here so that we can compare. All right, that's what you do with a comparison table. All right, so notice red, green, and blue, far more interspersed, far more rod cells than cone cells. All right, so light passes in this way. The cells react. The photoreceptor goes back this way. Your ganglion towards the optic nerve. So notice right here, towards the optic nerve, bringing it up. All right, so let's take a look at that comparative table of rod and cone cells specifically. It's all going to show up at once because, well, it just is. I would have written it in class. There's the diagram. All right, so the rod and the cone cells. All right, so your location, okay, rod cells outside the fovea, the most concentration of the cone cells is in the fovea. So look at your eye that you label to where the fovea is. Light conditions, dim versus bright. Less accurate rod, very accurate with enough light. Visual acuity, several rods, 3 rods to 1 bipolar, 1 to 1 with the neurons. All colors of light. 3 different kinds of cone cells. 3 different kinds of cone cells. Achromatic, black and white. Color, 1 type of rod, 3 type of color. Much more. You saw the picture. Let's go back to that picture. You saw there. Let's go back to that picture. You saw many more rod cells versus cone cells here. All right, more. All right, much more. Okay, going on there. So what do we have here? You see your specific shape, and it actually looks like that. You know, it looks like this, even in the model, looks a little different. The rod cells look rodish. The cone cells are a little shorter in the electron micrograph. All right, photoreceptor wavelength. Take a look there. All right. Notice the rod cells much more. The dotted line there, they see going through much more wider wavelength that goes into blue all the way over to red. Meanwhile, the blue, the green, and the red are much more narrow photoreceptor wavelength. All right. So again, the pathway of light, just to make sure, rod cells very sensitive. I'll bring all these up here. Excuse me. All these up here. Rod to cone to bipolar to the optic nerve with the optic nerve ganglion there. All right, so anything else we didn't cover here? Let me take a look at my notes here. Rod and cone cells are photoreceptors located in the retina. Covered it. Rod and cone cells differ in their sensitivities of light. All right, covered it right there. All right, so a comparison. Bipolar cells send impulses from the rod and cone cells. Yes, they do, to ganglion cells. That would be your diagram there. Let's go back 1. That would be this diagram here. Ganglion cells send message to the brain via the optic nerve. That would be this. So again, this is going to be this section here, your optic nerve, ganglion nerve cells. All right, so that concludes this screencast.